Okay, so my videos on what is power, and an example that I'm going to give is from the Navy. I've been in the Navy for 17 years, and I am a Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy, which is an E7. All branches have E1 through E9, and the promotion from E6 to E7 in any other branch is an amazing promotion regardless of what branch you're in. But in the Navy, it holds a special tradition, and what we do is we go through what we call a season, which is a 6-week long period of training where we're asked to exhibit a bunch of different leadership styles. We are being tested on our character, personality, leadership, and all these other things to help us become better leaders in our brand new role. So I say that because as you become a Chief Petty Officer in the Navy, you're going to have two different distinctive avenues of power. The first one, which is the direct power, is the UCMJ. That is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it outlines our roles, our authorities as E7s in the Navy. The need for lack of better words, for junior sailors to abide by lawful orders given to them. So that encompasses all that, right? So a chief petty officer in the Navy could give an order, and that sailor is, because of social norms, understands that they have to abide by that order if it's a lawful order. If it's not a lawful order, obviously they don't have to follow that order. And they have the freedom to not follow the order even if it is a lawful order, but they would encounter the consequences that come along with disobeying a lawful order. And then you have the indirect side of our leadership as Chief Petty Officers in the Navy, and that comes from the traditions of who we are and what the rest of the Navy sees us as. A Chief Petty Officer in the Navy also has a bunch of authority that isn't necessarily written out anywhere else. We have basically a how would I say a set of rules that we adhere to be better leaders, but that aren't really written anywhere else, right? I can call another chief petty officer that I don't know and ask them for something, and they would feel obligated because of the brotherhood and sisterhood that we all belong to. So I bring all that up to say we are constantly using our power to lead sailors. And sometimes we're going to lead sailors to do things that are necessary to do that they don't want to do. So there's a book by Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power, and he writes, the feeling of having no power over people and events is generally unbearable to us. When we feel helpless, we feel miserable. No one wants less power, everybody wants more power. So telling a sailor that they have to do something that they don't necessarily want to do is a part of everyday life. But getting them to understand and see why they need to do it sometimes takes leading from the front, which is something that we commonly use in the Navy, and that's being the example, not necessarily telling people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. We also have a term for that, which is do as I say, not as I do, right? Which is counter to what we want to be able to portray to our sailors. So as a leader, you want to cultivate an environment where you can lead sailors, but you also are developing and challenging sailors so that they are able to gain their own sense of power. because as you grow, your self-worth gives you an inherent feeling of power, more responsibility, more power, new skills learned, more power. So I want to talk a little bit about threats and promises, and how that enables us to lead in the Navy. One of the things we constantly are taught by other leaders and peers is that we don't want to necessarily lead through promises, because there is an inability to control everything that you need to be able to fulfill some of those promises. So for example, promising somebody good evaluation, or promising a sailor advancement to the next pay grade. Those are things that, if promised directly, lead to and aren't fulfilled because we don't necessarily control those things. There's a lot of factors, a lot of different levels that go into those things. That can create a sailor to be upset, or feel like they're betrayed, or feel like the extra work that they felt they put in was somehow manipulated. They were manipulated to do so because of these empty promises. So it's very, very important to not overstep or promise the things that you cannot control. So the way you speak, the way you convey, your message is crucial and critical to a sailor's understanding that what we're trying to do is put them in the best position possible, so that these things have an opportunity to come through. And we often use the word, hey, I often use the word, I'm going to put you in the conversation, right? We can get you into the conversation. And that's really all we can strive to do for these sailors, is put them in the conversation for these different promotions and advancements and awards and so on and so on. And then when we think about threats, it kind of go back to that UCMJ piece that we spoke about earlier, is I don't necessarily have to threaten anybody because of that direct power or that resource that is the UCMJ, that they understand. Earlier you spoke and said power is powerful when it doesn't need to be practiced, right? I don't need to tell a sailor that there'll be punitive action for them not showing up to work. They know that, and they show up to work daily. So with threats, to threaten somebody with punitive actions or reprisal for acts that they shouldn't be doing, you have to tread lightly, because if you don't have the ability to fulfill that threat, what happens is that person may intentionally or unintentionally cross that line, and if you can't fulfill that threat, you lose power and you lose control, and honestly, you lose the ability to lead that sailor, because there has to be a level of, I wouldn't say threat, but respect of how things work and the order of things work, because of that punitive action. I guess the easiest way to relate that would be like a speed limit. You can speed a little bit past that, 65 miles per hour that's posted, but you need that fear that I can't go 120 because I'm going to go to jail, right? And that's the same way with threats. That possibility needs to be there, and once that threat loses its validity, I believe that you no longer have that mindset that, well, I can't go 120 or I can get arrested. I'll push 120, I'll push 130 if I truly want to, because there's no repercussions. And I think that's just social norms and things like that. But just kind of to wrap up what I feel power is, right? You have those that level of power that is inherent, and then you have that level of power that it comes through leadership, and how people view you or view the organization you're a part of. Um, and yeah, that's my video on power. Hopefully that made sense.